Hi, this is Dr. Scott, and today we're going to talk about how DOGE is going to kill off the Fed and why. Let me show you how this works here. So I'm going to show you a first video. This is really kind of cool. I muted the first part, so I didn't want to get in trouble with censors on that, which totally is reasonable on that point here. So let me make sure it's all backward and set up. Okay, here we go.
And also, could you mention some of the things that your team has found, some of the crazy numbers, including the woman that walked away with about 30 million,
Right.
etc.?
Well, we do find it sort of rather odd that there are quite a few people in the bureaucracy who have ostensibly a salary of a few $100,000, but somehow manage to accrue tens of millions of dollars in net worth while they are in that position, which is, what happened to USAID. We're just curious as to where it came from. Maybe they're very good at investing, in which case we should take their investment advice, perhaps. But just there seems to be mysteriously they get wealthy. We don't know why. Where does it come from? And I think the reality is that they're getting wealthy at the taxpayer expense. That's the honest truth of it.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about. Woo!
So I think one of the things that we look at, we're just going, I mean, that's a hysterical take with that too. I did a video a while ago about this, that Elon does have a stuttering disorder. And I know that because I have my own stuttering disorder. And you'll see that every once in a while. But it's very fascinating that he's talking about this. This is how the Fed dies. I have been talking to you for 5 years about how the IRS goes away and how the Fed goes away too. And I've said things like the Fed is dead. Now we're seeing the end, or that death. You want to think how close we are on that? When they start touching in there, and by the way, how long did it take for the USAID? It's a lot bigger than the Fed is. The Fed's easy. The Fed's got a huge number of employees though too. It's got like 22,000 employees the last I heard. They're going, for what? What do you do? Well, they just screw around with the economy. They tweak it in ways just for their own benefit with that too. Let's watch this one. This is fascinating kind of stuff. This is on the Senate floor.
In your legal opinion, what is reputational risk?
That would be very difficult to define, Senator, because it really has no definition. It's something that, as I said earlier, it's malleable. It can be reinterpreted. It's in the discretion of the regulators. So what is reputation risk today might be something different tomorrow.
Does it give bank examiners license to censor viewpoints or base regulatory decisions on someone's subjective viewpoint of what is a controversial comment?
It can.
Well, let me show you that it does. So here's this quote from an internal excerpt. It's a confidential Federal Reserve implementation handbook on account access. It requires that Federal Reserve staff consider whether a person has made a, quote, controversial comment in making decisions about access to the payment system. And of course, access to the payment system is a defining feature of a bank, is it not?
Access to the payment system. How do they do this? And I get this a lot where people go, I don't understand. How do they do this? Well, they've been doing this for generations. The DEA would find a drug dealer, whatever, or a whole organization, and they will basically shut off the funds. They've done this to the mob. And those are the external ways of the good way, and this is the Fed doing it. So the Fed has been talking to the three-letter agencies to work this. Now, what we finally get to see is this level of it happening to the regular person. By the way, it's been happening to regular persons for generations, but we have never heard about it. Now they're showing it out in front of you. Censorship for what you say, not a drug deal or a massive illegal thing. Just what you say doesn't even allow you to have access to your money. And it's not happening just in the banks, but listen to what he says further with this too. It's happening more systemically in the Fed.
Correct, very much so. Without that, a bank is a vault.
So is it dangerous for the Fed to serve as judge and jury on a particular banker's speech?
Senator, I'm kind of absorbing that still a little bit because it's really quite unusual. I've never seen anything like that before, but my immediate reaction is, number one, it sort of proves out the comments I've been making about the subjectivity around reputation risk, because who's to say what is controversial and what is not controversial?
It's a beautiful statement how he said that, how he answers that. And he says more, but I cut it at that one. So let's watch actually what Kennedy talks about. This is fascinating stuff that he does.
But if the United States of America has been taking taxpayer money and using it to produce a transgender opera in Colombia, then I want to know about it. And I'm glad to know about it. I hear Mr. McCauley, Mr. Ring, and Mr. Gannon saying is that some of America's banks have been discriminating, debanking customers because of their religious beliefs, because they support the Second Amendment, or because they hate fossil fuels.
Yes, sir.
Which banks?
Well, I think it's been publicly reported that Bank of America has certainly picked and choose winners.
Who else?
I think Chase Bank has.
Who else?
I think Citibank has.
Who else?
I think KeyBank has.
Who else?
I'm going to probably run out of names pretty soon, but I think the mega banks are. Old Glory Bank is not, of course.
Mega
We love
banks.
the Second Amendment and fossil fuels.
We need to get those banks in here. You think, are banks doing this because they're scared of the regulators? Or are they doing this because the people running the banks are prosecuting their political beliefs?
I think it's definitely the latter, and I think it's also middle management.
What do you mean the latter?
It is not the regulators. I do not believe the regulators pushed the big banks to debank conservative
You
causes. I do not. I think it was their internal choice.
Okay, so guess what? This is the exposure of the banks. When we have exposure of the banks and we basically, wipe out the Fed, we're going to wipe out the Fed debt, which is something I've talked about over and over again. As soon as you do that, you go, wait a second, I don't owe it. Why don't I owe it? Let's go, and I'm going to show you this one. I know this is going to take me a second here to bring it up here on the screen, but we're going to show you, and I've used this 100 times to explain this here, and I know I keep explaining the same thing here. I apologize for kind of telling you the same issue, but people need to hear it until they kind of calculate it together here. But show you for sure, the 14th Amendment, 1868, and this is the cool part of the DOGE stuff. So just look at this thing here. The validity of the public debt of the United States. What would that be? The Fed debt of the 37 trillion. Authorized by law, including the debts and payments. So it's saying, what are they doing here? Payments incurred by pensions and bounties. Now, what you're going to struggle in, and this is 1800s kind of statement. What would be a bounty or a pension? A bounty is related to a war situation. You've probably heard many times, all wars are banker wars. That's what a bounty is talking about here. And pensions are monies that the individuals inside the government are taking for their own personal benefit. That's talking of the DOGE conversation. If how should I put this? If Elon was sitting in front of you He could have been reading the 14th Amendment verbatim, but he was using today's wording. How does a person that's making $100,000 a year have 30 million bucks? This is the reason why he's talking about the pensions. And they're suppressing insurrection and rebellion. This shall not be questioned, but neither the United States or any state shall assume any debt of the United States. Any claim for loss or emancipation of a slave. So basically it's saying you don't get to do this. Those debts and obligation claims shall be held illegal and void. This is how you kill off the Fed. This is how you take care of it. And it is going to be in a legal fashion done through DOGE. And we're going to see the death of the Fed and a gold-backed currency. Did I just prove it for you? I hope I did, because I just proved how I've been talking about this for 4 years, almost 5. Thanks so much.